Hello, I'm Dan Grant with the Carter Center, and this is the latest edition of Election Bites, the Carter Center's efforts to have bite sized pieces of information for you to hear about how the elections are going in America in 2022. And so today, our subject of conversation is Stronger Together, building community resilience before, during, and after November, and what we're doing, and how you, the viewer, can help. And so the two guests that I have with me today are Jennifer Webb, the Democratic former state representative of Florida, and Robert Orr, the Republican former Supreme Court Justice of North Carolina, both of whom are involved in the resilience networks in Florida and North Carolina, respectively. And I'd just like to jump right in and, first of all, welcome to both of you for coming today.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks,
Dan.
Dan.
Thanks for having us on.
Well, so in keeping with this subject, one thing that really is of interest is, in your experience thus far, what are the different ways that you've approached your work, respectively, in Florida and in North Carolina, to do this for local resiliency? Bob, I know that you held a trusted elections tour in North Carolina. How did that factor into things?
Well, when we started this project, it was all right, what are we going to do to strengthen the election system and the public's awareness of how it works here in North Carolina? And so my co chair, Jennifer Roberts, the former mayor of Charlotte, and I came up with this trusted elections tour in which we went to each of the 14 congressional districts in North Carolina. And we held what was, in essence, a town hall with local election officials, with attorneys who represent both the Democrat and Republican interest in the state, and a cybersecurity expert. And the public came, the media came, and it was a great opportunity to answer questions, but also to provide, I think, a sense of confidence in how we run elections here in North Carolina.
Okay, and Jennifer, I know you did something similar in Florida by visiting various state elections offices. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so similar to Bob, my co-chair, Kurt Kelly, and I, we were thinking, where do we really need to shore up confidence, or how can we best shore up confidence in our elections, especially at the point in which we were in the election cycle. And we had spoken to our Supervisors of Elections Association, and they said, we want people to come and tour our facilities to understand that our process is, transparent, is reliable, is secure. And if you can help us get out that message and come and bring folks through, we will. And so we really reached out to folks that are known to be trusted messengers. So your nurses, your teachers, your clergy, firefighters, police officers, veterans, to come like everyday neighbors and to tour their supervisors of elections, along with some media and some, you know, um, like grass tops leaders, but really like everyday folks to say, oh, I've seen this for myself. This is reliable, and you can trust our supervisor of election. And so we did that across the I-4 corridor, starting in Pinellas County and going all the way to Marion County on the other side and making a lot of stops along the way.
And in the experience for both of you, did you find that the individuals who you met and participated, this helped reinforce their faith in the electoral process and they spread that? What was your experience with that after the fact for the both of you?
Yeah, it certainly did. And I think there were several pockets of groups. One would be folks that, already came in with a certain sense of confidence in the election system, but they were able to get new specific um aspects of provisional ballots or early day voting decisions, how the times and locations were set. We also, like Florida, we have a lot of people moving to North Carolina, and so one of the things we saw were fairly recent residents to the state who had experiences with other election systems, say Ohio, Massachusetts, Arizona, and so they came, and it was great to hear their response of, wow, this has really been helpful in understanding how North Carolina works. And I would have to say, having been in elections either as a candidate or in politics numerous times, I learned a lot from it. And I think our election officials were appreciative of being able to talk with the public, to kind of get their message out, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about how the systems work. Florida, and Jennifer can address this, elects their supervisors of the local election boards. We have a bipartisan appointed panel that's not elected. So some really significant differences.
And I love that you mentioned, Bob, the recently relocated electorate, and that's a group that we didn't reach out to intentionally, but I think that one way of growing our network is to pull those people in, because you're absolutely right. They come with the knowledge and presuppositions that have been forged in other states and may not understand how the elections process works, and likely don't understand how the elections process works in the state that they now live in. And so I love that y'all did that. And I actually made a note on my notepad for us to do that. And on our end, similar to Bob, we and Jennifer, Kurt and I had some folks who were a little cautious. I wouldn't say downright like, I think my vote's being stolen, but more of the sentiment of, you have to convince me that this is a solid process. And we had a few folks like that. And then we had some residents who really were part of the silent, what I'm starting to phrase as the silent majority, who are like, I know our elections are solid. I want to see it for myself because I want to go and share it with my neighbors. You don't really have to convince me. I just want to be part of the solution here and getting out the message that our elections are free, fair, safe, and secure. And I know that people trust firsthand experience. And so they were very grateful to have that experience of seeing, step by step, the effort and the thoughtfulness that goes into every single step of the voting process by our supervisors of election, who are elected in Florida, unlike in some other states.
That's really good to hear. To continue on this, now that election day has come and gone, in your experience and from what you've seen, how can voters continue to support the democratic process going forward? What would you advise?
I'll start with this one.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, go ahead,
Bob. Jennifer.
No,
I defer to the great state of Florida.
Well, thank you, sir. So I think that on our end, it's twofold. We want folks to have, conversations, to connect on issues that touch on politics without it devolving into ad hominem attacks or, hyper partisan rhetoric. Like, that's our goal. That's what, to us, a resilient community looks like. It looks like being able to disagree without being disagreeable is a shorthand for that. But additionally, now that we're past the election cycle, now's the time to look at, well, how is access to our ballot? How are these processes that enfranchise our community members, are they as free, fair, safe, and secure as the ballot counting process? And I'm excited for that portion of the conversation, because that is important to an entirely different segment of the electorate than the making sure that the supervisors of elections are counting your ballots and only counting them once. And I think we need both. We need to acknowledge both sides of the equation and to pull people into conversation on both sides of, casting your ballot, in order to really reinstill confidence, meaningful confidence that is resilient in our elections process.
Yeah, from the North Carolina perspective, Dan, there are two things. One, I think one of the numbers that jumped out at me was that in any given statewide election cycle, we have over 25,000 volunteers of all political persuasions who work and help in the election process. And there was a constant message of, we need more volunteers. we need people to become involved in helping us put on elections. And so, I mean, that's a great way for people to learn how the process works and to actually be engaged from a civic context in helping to work in elections. And the second is, and this is, different ways you could do it, but I think we really need to get statewide and community leaderships, and I would say maybe from the business community, to put together a commission to talk about what is a fair, safe, and secure election. To Jennifer's point about enfranchisement, let's talk about what that means. Let's talk about what are the best practices. How can we provide? How can the state and county governmental entities provide adequate funding and staffing for elections? And so, what we have not had in North Carolina, and I suspect we haven't had in other states, is sort of a high-level blue ribbon group talking about the whole ball of wax of, from registration through voting access, through counting ballots, through certification, because the elections really are the foundation of democracy. If you don't have confidence in your elections, you're not going to have confidence in your governmental system. And so we all, no matter what the political perspectives may be or party affiliations, I think have a responsibility to be talking about how do we improve the system? How do we make it fail-safe, secure, and open?
Well, as a final question, just given the cross-partisan nature of your experiences, Jennifer, you're a Democrat. Bob, you're a Republican, so you probably don't see eye to eye on a lot of political issues. Yet you're working together.
I have to correct you, Dan. I was a Republican for 45 years. I'm now unaffiliated. Take that for whatever it's worth. But yeah, your point's well taken.
Yeah, but in terms of the differences that you have, I mean, can you talk about how it's been to get along with people who you don't necessarily agree with politically, but still manage to get along? Like, what's that experience been like, and what's the secret to success for the both of you in doing so?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, sure. One of the things that encouraged me about this process early on was a bipartisan or cross-partisan response from Republicans and Democrats that, I am concerned, that these messages about I don't trust the elections or my vote's not going to count or the election was stolen really are undermining confidence in our system. And from both Republicans and Democrats who might fundamentally disagree on all sorts of policy issues, all shared that same concern. And so that was encouraging. And it was really important to see the county board members. Right now it's 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans. In our town halls, they would talk about, Mary and I don't agree on anything politically, but we do agree on the importance of fair, safe, and secure elections, and we work together from beginning to end to achieve that goal, regardless of our political differences. So it really was, to me, a very encouraging and a very supportive message that we received from people of both political parties or different ideological bents to say it's an important issue, and we agree on what we need to do to strengthen it.
Yeah, and I'll take it kind of in a more experiential. I'll answer it from a more experiential lens. Is I think that coming together with colleagues from different political from across a political perspective it requires grace and space. And so by grace, I mean, choose to make a positive assumption. You get a choice of how you hear how people talk about things. You can infer an insult, not that Bob has ever done this, but just in general, as we are preparing for Thanksgiving. You can assume the insult, or you can extend grace and extend understanding. And so I think that's important. And by space, what I mean is instead of being reactive, choose to be responsive. Take that breath, center yourself, remember the higher good. And the higher good is protecting our our democratic processes, which are the foundation of our representative republic or our democracy, depending on how you like to phrase it. But it's so very important, and so keeping that higher goal in mind, and choosing to relate and have a relationship across difference really goes a long way. And it can be challenging at times. Um, you know, it's no secret that Democrats got shellacked in Florida last night. I am not feeling great. Like I really want to go run out and call a bunch of my Republican friends and and talk to them right now. But you know what I do? I send text messages because those relationships are important and they're not part of the problem, but they can be part of the solution in terms of helping to get the message out that our elections are free, fair, safe, and secure, and that our democracy is worth investing the time and intellectual talent that Bob was talking about earlier in order to make it an even more perfect union and an even more perfect process. And I think in addition to bringing together great thinkers on the philosophical or theoretical or legal side, we also need to bring forward really good statisticians or people who can collate that data, help us understand, like, whether something, at what point it looks like voter suppression versus just cooling the ballots or things like that. And so I think in general, this is it's been easy for folks to pause and to choose to relate to each other from their highest self, because what's at stake is so important and is so big, and no one really wants to see our democracy in peril. So coming together across difference is, if that's what it takes. People are actually willing right now to figure out how to do it.
I want to give a shout out to the Carter Center for
Yeah.
initiating this project. It's
Hmm.
um, you got a lot of experience overseas working, obviously, in the international uh, field with elections. This is a new endeavor, as I understand it, for the Carter Center. But the Carter Center's leadership and willingness, to see how this might work, I think, is deserving of the public's applause.
Well, and to touch on the answers that you both gave, it struck me that each of you approach it from a different perspective, but they're both the necessary ingredients. Because Bob, you talked about a universal respect and valuation of the process, and Jennifer, you talked about a valuation of everyone involved, and those two things taken together are clearly what helps make this whole thing work. I wanted to thank you both for taking the time and doing this today, but then also your involvement in this whole affair. It couldn't be done without all the efforts that you're putting into it. So thank you both. I want to encourage everyone watching to tune in next week for our next iteration of Election Bites, where we will be talking about how everyone counts, how every vote counts, and how every vote should be counted, how election audits are complex, difficult, and absolutely necessary. So we hope you'll join in. And thanks again to Justice Robert Orr and Representative Jennifer Webb. Thank you both so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Dan.
you, Dan.